So let's dive straight into this. So the way I'm going to do the talk today is I'm going to cover a little bit about what Web3 is. I'm going to talk about how we design in a transitionary period, which I'll explain, why and why that matters. I'll talk a little about UX fundamentals. Then we'll go into what Web3 looks like now, and then I'll talk about Web3 design. So I thought I'd tell you what I'm doing before I do it, in case you're like, did she forget what her talk was all about? So I haven't, but there's some fundamentals we'll cover off first. So I know this is not a design audience. That doesn't matter. In our teams, we all make decisions about how we set up our products in ways that humans, users will interact with them. So even though a lot of you aren't designers, some of you will be working with designers, but a lot of the decisions you make affect how people interact. So the concepts are going to be applicable, for everybody. So I said teeny tiny bit about Web3. I'm not going to cover this in detail, and I don't need to explain the technology, otherwise I wouldn't get to the pointy end of my talk. But Web3 is, to me, a non-technologist, a cluster of technologies and ideas. So we'll often include ideas around decentralization and individual ownership of things, rather than centralized services owning things. It's often about using blockchain to store information, often talking about cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance, assets as tokens, including, I'll talk a bit about non-fungible tokens later on. The metaverse, which I literally don't understand. And every single time I read an article about the metaverse and why everybody needs to be in it, I'm like, I still don't understand. So I'm completely not talking about the metaverse. And often about these things called decentralized autonomous organizations, which I also don't have any experience with. But the thing about Web3, these things, is that it's not one thing. So firstly, you'll be working with one or two elements of this in a project, even though it's kind of collectively talked about as one thing. So that's the first kind of thing to know about it. And for today's talk, it doesn't matter if you don't understand what each of these are. I'm not going to go into them in detail. I'm talking fairly high, but I still needed to kind of cover off what I think are the elements before diving into what, how we might design for them. So when I started, thinking about how to structure, well, not only how to structure this talk, but when I started thinking about literally what is the answer to that question of how you design for Web3, I realised that a lot of it is really about designing for a transitionary state, a state where we're moving from either one technology to another, or one set of ideas to another. So it's not about Web3 itself, but how do we design in this point when things are potentially fundamentally changing? So I've been a designer for, 20 years or so. Who knows how to count these things? And I got this, cool picture of waves. I was like, technologies come in waves. They come in waves and they, thump over us. And so in my career, I've seen a lot of different kind of waves of technology come in, and I've worked through a number of transitionary periods. So I made this kind of dumb slide, which I'm not going to go into either, but I was thinking about the different waves of technology that I've certainly designed for, and how each time, we add some new stuff, and we keep the things from before in a lot of cases, and some things kind of become less important over time. So, right down the bottom there, I'm not actually old enough to have designed for mainframe, but I'm certainly old enough to have worked on mainframe systems where the way we interacted was with menus and forms. So to get to that screen, you would go 54217, and then you would enter data. And we don't tend to do that anymore. So one of the really important things to think about for designing for Web3 is that we already know a ton of stuff. We are literally going to be designing websites, web applications, mobile applications, probably, metaverse-y stuff. We'll pull in a bunch of stuff from game design, AR, VR. So we already have a lot of what we should need to design these things. We're not throwing it out. We're not disappearing it. There should be a bunch of skills that we just carry over. So it's not brand new, but it certainly is slightly different. But another important concept with transitionary period, and you just talked about patterns as well, is it takes a while for the way that we do things, for good practice and best practice to evolve. So when we, early in a new technology, a new way of thinking, a new whatever, we tend to need to design in really bespoke ways. So we design individual solutions for individual problems in individual contexts. Over time, we start seeing how, what kind of patterns evolve, and we can then design from those patterns to the point where we have good practices and best practices, and these are just how the world works. So certainly in this field, we're definitely at the point where we're doing, I certainly am, and looking at the ecosystem, I'm certain that we're in this really bespoke phase. There aren't, generalised solutions, there aren't common patterns, there aren't common ways of doing things. We're doing designs for individual problems. And that's good to recognise that, you can't just go and see what everybody else is doing. You've got to kind of start from first principles, go back to foundations and start from scratch. The difficulty with this, and this also relates to your talk with, actually people don't know the fundamentals anymore. Design education particularly really focuses on, again, good practices, copying what other people are doing, using pattern libraries. And most designers don't have an education around kind of fundamental human cognition. How do we think? How do we work in the world? Designers just don't have that these days. I have it because I've been designing forever, and also I did a master's degree where I learned a lot of real kind of fundamentals of humans. So if you are working on a team with designers, particularly if they've come from a graphic design background, they won't be able to start from first principles. They'll be like, I don't know, how do we do this thing? Because they don't have the fundamentals. And if you're hiring, what you want to be looking for is, how do people think? How do they unpack a problem? Can they go to first principles and start, from the ground up and think through a problem from there? And they're really hard to find those people. But that's kind of what they'll need to be able to start designing in this place. The other thing that designers always need to do, but again, this is a kind of new field, new technology. Designers always need to understand how a technology works, as each of them brings new things that you can do, new things that you can't do, and really new ways of thinking about this. I remember when Rob first did a bit of Web3 work, he said, I spent the whole weekend doing this, and finally, because it's a whole different way of thinking. And designing for it is a whole different way of thinking. My brain keeps getting blown as well. And designers who don't put time into understanding the technology make big mistakes, often don't design ambitiously enough, or design things that are literally impossible. So if you're working with anything in this field, make sure that you give your designers time and methods to understand how this bizarre stuff works. So I said, in order to design from first principles, we need to understand some really kind of fundamentals. Clearly I'm not going to do a fundamentals of UX talk today, but I've picked out a couple of things that I think are really interesting and applicable to working in this space. So we always will say that you need to know your users so that you can design for them. I've noticed so far, I can't kind of think about, users in general and in groups and in stereotypes. In this case, we need to talk with our actual users about their actual things that they're going to be, using, potentially these products for. I've done a lot of user research over the years, but most of it isn't going to transfer into this new world. So to do user research, I'm going to need to talk to actual individual people who are using the products. It also means that if somebody says, I'm working on this thing and we've got this kind of problem, which direction should we go? My example will be, I don't know. I don't know your folks and where they are up to right now. That is actually the work, is to understand those people and where they're up to and how to design for them. Another fundamental is to understand how people learn. And I laugh. The reason I'm laughing is because I'm at a conference where I'm sitting here listening to talks and going, I just heard all those words and I didn't learn a thing, because learning involves having fundamental building blocks to learn on top of. The way we learn is to take our previous experiences and attach things to them. And I'm trying really hard, but for a lot of the topics that I'm listening to, which are all great talks and beautifully structured and really well presented, I'm going, I'm missing the blocks. I can't build on top of them. But it's important, here for designing for Web3, because we need to very much understand what those building blocks are and how to build off them. I'll come back to this one at the end and actually give you some tips for helping people learn about this new thing. But yeah, I was musing about that, going, this is why I'm if somebody said, what did you learn from that? I'd be like, I don't know. I heard lots of words. I'm understanding some of the talks, just not the really technical ones. Another thing that's really, fundamental UX thing is to understand these things called mental models. So a mental model is the way we think the world works. Particularly applicable for working with technology, because people make up ideas about how they think a technology works because they can't see inside it. So I'm going to come back to mental models lots as I go through some examples, and I'll come back to it at the end as well, to how you can use this idea to practically design. The last kind of fundamental UX, I don't know if this is a UX thing, anyway, I think it's an interesting thing about humans that we need to know, is we need to understand this concept of where are people up to in a technology adoption cycle. It's good to understand that there are differences between people who are going to come on early, the early innovators. There are differences and characteristics of people who are early adopters. I don't think this is a perfect model, but I think it's a good thing to remember that people have different, particularly ability to learn new technology and learn new things, but also an ability to tolerate risk. And different kinds of people will tolerate risk in different spots. So it's just another interesting thing to think about. And I'll come back to this later. And I was like, no, I won't explain that now, I'll explain it later. So that's all the fundamental UX bits. I've managed that in 15 minutes, which is pretty good. So let's have a look at what Web3 looks like right now. I've got tons of examples. So the first thing is that it's really freaking hard to understand. The concepts are really hard. Decentralization is a really hard thing to think about. How do things work when nobody organises them? It's really hard. The technology is different. The idea of organisations autonomously making decisions is really different. I think they're different, at least. And you may understand the technologies, but your designers will be like, I don't know what this is. The jargon is huge. and in some places I think used to deliberately keep outsiders out. You know, and like jargon serves a purpose. We use jargon to like shortcut complex, you know, ways of thinking about new things. But this is, again, like I've seen all those, you know, waves of new tech. This is the one that I see most jargon, that I find most difficult to understand. And I'm actually a pretty smart person, so like, this isn't just me not being able to do it. This is like hard. There's still a lot of wondering what the use cases for Web3 are. You'll see people explain what it is without really saying what problems it's solving. There's loads of hype. And as I said before, it's talked about it as if it's one thing, where really it's definitely not one thing. If you're interested in just like learning about, you know, kind of what Web3 is basically, search this later. If you forget what to search, just ask me. Freakonomics Radio did a really good 3-part series, and I shared with my team, and a number of them said, oh my God, that like finally settled some concepts in my head. It certainly settled concepts in my head. I'm like, right, okay, now I'm kind of starting to understand how to think about this in a different way. User research right now is hard to do. Like, this is a niche thing, and so it's hard to find folks who are likely to be interested in the problems that it's solving. So user research can be tricky. If, as a product, you're finding it hard to find folks to research with, that's also potentially a warning bell for the product of finding, you know, folks who might be interested in using it as a product. One way that this can work now is to go where people are. And, you know, one of the places where people are is on Discord. So you can go and hang out and watch people talk about the Web3 things that they're doing. It's a really good way of understanding their jargon. It's a really good way of seeing the kinds of questions that people ask a lot, the things that they're puzzled about, the mistakes that they make. So it's a way of getting information about users without necessarily, you know, doing what we would have called traditional user research. There's a ton of negative press, a lot of it completely justifiable, but it's worth knowing and understanding what's happening and how it's being talked about, because potentially your users are seeing this kind of thing as well. And, you know, it definitely, the way, again, like lots of pieces of this topic are talked about will affect how people might react to it. So this site's really good. Web3 is going just great. It's important to know right now that people have lost a lot of money, some because the market changed, some because there's a non-swear word ton of scams going on. And I don't know if this is like kind of a UX thing, but it's important to know that, you know, that people have genuinely lost a lot of money, that there's a lot of negativity around that as there should be. And a lot of the negativity is about, you know, clearly, this happens with everything, is not about the technology itself. It's about humans being assholes using a technology to hurt other people. And it's like we just need to know, you know, what's going on, because it will affect the, you know, when we choose ethical projects where the technology is a good fit for a solution, there's still, you know, this other wide world of garbage. It's pretty awful reading through people's stories about how they lost all their life savings. So the current user experience is literally terrible. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples from a lot of screenshotting last week. There's just generally poor usability. When I showed that first slide about like the stacking up of things over time, like in the old days we used to talk about usability, and then we stopped talking about usability and we talked about user experience and UI and stuff. We stopped talking about usability because it just became, like, you just got to make your stuff usable. But, like, I'm seeing just things that are entirely unusable. There's a lot of complex process, there's a lot of confusing process, and when things go wrong, there's nowhere to go. So let me give you a bunch of examples. I was poking around on art websites last week while I was, getting ready for this, screenshotting and showing examples. And honestly, I think that in about maybe 2001, I solved what do you do when you've got a really large set of content and people need to find some of it? You use a filter. Ta-da! I cannot tell you how many sites, like, the listing things where you want to narrow down and find something cool, that, like, literally, the way to do it is to scroll endlessly. I scrolled the other day for, like, 10 minutes because I had a certain amount of coin that I wanted to spend, and all I could do with a set of content was sort it by price, high to low. I didn't want the top stuff, I didn't want the bottom stuff. I was like, I have like 0.8 of a thing. There was no way to do it except for loading pages and pages and pages of screens, and I still didn't get there. Anyway, this is a solved problem. We know how to do this. Clearly, these folks don't. Another just really general, and this is one example because it's a really cool cat, and it looks just like my daughter's cat, and I so want this piece of art. I put an offer in for this piece of art last week, and I still have no idea what happens next. I don't know when my offer might be accepted. I don't know if I didn't really offer enough. This is an otherwise really quite good website. They've got a quite good filter, but a lot of sites and applications are forgetting to tell people the basics about how the world works, and to tell people the sequencing and what, when you do a thing, what does it mean to do that thing? Where does your money go? What happens next? How do you pull out of it if you want? Like, basic stuff of telling people, how things work is just completely missing. I really do like that cat. It's very cool. There's a load of complex processes. This is me screenshotting, setting up an account in a coin exchange so that I could get some coins to spend on stuff to take screenshots. 28 steps to set up an account. Mind you, I'm okay with some of this because a lot of it is KYC and anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism, financing, which I can never say, regulation. So a lot of the steps are there for good reasons, but they impose a lot of friction. They put a lot of barrier in front of people to sign up. I was thinking about it though, and I don't know if this is any worse than signing up for a bank account at a new bank. But usually that we have to do. This is often totally discretionary. So this friction will just stop people from going ahead. It then took me 5 steps to set up a wallet, which wasn't too bad, and another 8 to add that same wallet to my browser so I could buy things on my computer. And then it took another 10 steps to actually put coins that I bought into my wallet. The very first time I did this, there was also a 2-day delay because Westpac wouldn't let me buy crypto with my money. This time I tried a different bank and it happened immediately. So I didn't have a 2-day delay as well. I managed to do this all in one day and lots of screenshotting. Not to mention, this is like the classic UX thing that people will talk about with Web3 is when you set up a new account, you have to write down a 12 to 25 word phrase, because it is the only way you will get back into your account again. There is nobody to ask to reset your password. This is the only thing that you have to get back into your account. So you need to write it on a piece of paper and stick it under your mattress. And when you go, researching to find out what you should do with this, the advice on hot wallets and cold wallets and things and stuff is also really confusing. I also, because I am clever, set up demo accounts in case I gave away anything on a screenshot. And then I set up real accounts that I never screenshotted, and then I moved all my things into my real accounts. So you can't steal my things by... And then I, scribbled things out. But I left that one because, the first example is actually a good exposed example of what this recovery phrase is all about. The process of, buying things, of the checkout process that we're all pretty familiar with, is really quite different. It's different on every blockchain, and it's different on every wallet on every blockchain. So you can see, which way will I point? I can go this far. There's my yellow line. If you look at the stuff here on the, what's that for you, on the right, that's showing the transaction. So in this case, it's telling me that I'm going to send 0.06 Sol and I'm going to receive this flower thing. So that's what that's telling me. It doesn't really look like a checkout process, does it? This is an example from the Polygon blockchain with the MetaMask wallet. This is telling me that I'm going to spend 29.29 Matic. And I was looking at this earlier when I was prepping, and I'm like, I actually don't think this tells me what I'm getting, which, is kind of a problem. And this is a third example. This is the Algorand blockchain and the wallet that's called My Algo Wallet. And this has more steps. Like this I had to sign 3 times for an authentication challenge, then a thing where I'm doing a thing, and then a thing where I'm wrapping up the thing, and then I get a thing and I've just got a close button. Does this look straightforward? It doesn't look straightforward to me. Poor old things. So there's loads and loads of scams as well. And in this process, I happily got scammed. So I can tell you the story about how I got scammed, and it really works well within the context of what I'm talking about. So when I bought that, the flowers, the pretty thing with the cherry blossoms, I opened my wallet and there were 2 other things in there, just sitting in my wallet. And I looked at it and it said that I should go to a place called MagicEdenDrops.com, and if I gave them back my mystery box, they would give me a thing. And I'm like, yes, I like things. But I'm actually somewhat clever. So before I did this, I moved my lovely cherry blossom flowers into my other wallet, and I also moved most of my coin into my other wallet because I wasn't quite sure that this was a real thing. And I didn't actually screenshot the whole thing, unfortunately, which I really wish I should have. But what happened here, so this website, Magic Eden Drops, looks really, really similar to Magic Eden. It's got the same navigation, it's certainly got the same brand. Magic Eden, when I Googled it, actually do these things called drops where they give you free things straight into your wallet. So it seemed like a thing that happens. But ultimately, the way this works is they write a transaction, and again, you can see that in the box, in the confusing transaction box to the side. They write a transaction where you give them back your 2 NFTs, and it reads how much money you've got in your account and writes a transaction for that. Then when you sign it, it actually literally just goes whoop, and takes everything out of your wallet. And you go, oh fuck, it's empty. But at least I was clever and I only lost 87 cents, and I was completely happy to lose 87 cents to see how this stuff works. And I'm going to come back to why this is so easy to happen to people. Because it's not my fault. I'm not an idiot. Actually, I am an idiot. Something I own, I accidentally bought because I was going, oh, I think this is just asking me to sign in, and I bought a thing. Anyway, I lost 87 cents. A lot of people have lost a lot more than 87 cents. And when you read about it, it'll always say that, the reason that they lost, all their assets was user error. They gave away their secret key, they didn't understand the transaction. It's from what you've seen there, I think you can probably tell that while it might be user error, you can understand why people make mistakes. So people have lost a lot more than my 87 cents through nasty scams. So I said this kind of earlier, the other problem here with the UX problem is that there's nowhere to go when something happens. There's nobody to help you. Okay, so let's have a look at how we might design for this. So I talked before about mental models, how we have a representation of how the world works. So I'm just going to run through quickly some mental models of how people think the world works and the model of some Web3 stuff, just so you can see that it's a bit different. So when I think about transferring funds to a friend, my model of it is that I ask the bank to take money out of an account, put it into my friend's account in another bank, and then my friend can use that money. That's kind of how I think that it works. It's probably not too much wrong. Web3 transferring money is literally, it's literally like opening your physical wallet and giving somebody 20 bucks. Done. But it has an extra layer of anonymity where it's actually, a wallet with a weird name, moving money to a wallet with another weird name. So you can see a little that if you've got this idea that things happen through a central process and they take a little bit of time and it takes 2 days to transfer a large amount to your builder and stuff, it's different to, hey, I've given you $20 out of my wallet. When I think about buying a digital product, the way I think it works is that I ask Visa about this thing. Visa checks I've got enough money. If I've got enough money, they promise that they're going to send money to the retailer, which actually happens later on. The retailer says, okay, I'm going to get this money, I'll send the product along. It sends me a digital product straight away. The way it works in the Web3 world is, at the exact same time, I give you money and I get back a thing. So this is why when I was looking at the Magic Eden thing, I'm like, well, the way we think the world works is that we promise to pay and they promise to give us a thing. So where Magic Eden says, when you give us back 2 NFTs, we're going to give you a thing, like I know how this works, but most people wouldn't. They will still expect that later on, Magic Eden are going to fulfill that promise and give it back. But they didn't, clearly. And there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to say, excuse me, they took my things and they didn't give me back what I wanted. Where in our current model, we can, talk to the retailer, or we can do a clawback through, Visa and the credit card process. So you can see why, I'm not an idiot. I have this model that when I give people money, they're going to give me a thing, and it won't be necessarily at the same time. So, I think most people have a vague mental model that our banking system is underpinned by some physical assets. I don't know what they think the crypto model is. I don't understand the crypto model. But you can imagine that if you're thinking that your investment that you're playing around with is backed by something and it's actually not, you can imagine how that goes wrong. I don't know if this is a mental model, but I thought it was really interesting. It was something we were working on recently. In the last year or so, I applied for work at a university and I was going for a bank loan. The university kept saying, can you send us things? Send us a copy of your driver's license, send us a copy of your transcript, send us a copy of your Working with Children check. The bank was like, Donna, can you send us a copy of your passport? And I'm like, I've already given you my passport 20 times. So my stuff is out there on various people's systems, like my actual, photocopies of my actual ID. So I have a model that's how that works. We were doing some work with digital credentialing where instead of sending the actual thing, you just send proof that you have the thing. May not be a mental model, but I was still thinking about it like, okay, how am I going to explain this new world to people when they're not actually sending their whole ID to live on somebody's system? They're just sending a thing that says, yes, I have that. Signing in is also another interesting kind of mental model. Like my conception of when I sign into a service is that I'm entering into a thing. And in that thing, maybe there are some things that I own, there's some information about me, I'm actually joining something. Comparing that to verifying with a wallet where you're just actually connecting your wallet to prove not even your own identity, but your wallet's identity. I only really thought about this when Rob said to me, why did you put sign up on that screen? It's not really sign up, it's wallet connection. I'm like, well, because people think they're signing up. And then I've spent a whole lot of time just thinking about the difference between these models. But it really was clear to me when I connected my wallet to an art site and then went to my page and it showed me everything I owned. And I'm like, but I don't have an account at this site. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's just reading everything off the blockchain that I own. I'm like, oh, that one did my head in. There's the cute dog that I accidentally bought because I thought I was like signing in and instead I bought a dog. Lucky I also, I didn't keep much money in that account. I'm like, oh, at least if this screws up, I'm losing like $20. I lost $20. I've got a cute dog though, she's with glasses. So the thing about mental models is, we need to decide what to do about this. And this is like actually the big kind of Web3 designing for this decision. Do we match the user's model or do we expose under the covers of how things really work? Now, the reason it's a big decision is most designers will say we need to match the user's mental model. The thing that will happen though, if we match the user's mental model, and that's why I went through a bunch of those examples, and their mental model really doesn't match the new world, they will make poor decisions and they will get scammed. So, we may need to match the system model, but if we do that, there's going to be friction and confusion and not understanding. So we need this, the difficult thing is going to be bridging that so that we can find the right balance between supporting what people already know and helping them understand the technology or the ideas so that they can make really good decisions. And not because they need to know that technology, but they need to know what's the consequence of things they're going to do. And I think that's actually those little words on that slide are like the point. I said I'd come back to the adoption curve. We also need to understand for our particular context and product, where are people? What's their appetite for risk? Are they, and how good are they at learning, how new things work? And then designing around that. So if we know that we're going to be designing for folks who are like on the innovation end, who are up for tolerating some risk, who might have a bit of funding that they, are actually able to use, that they want to be a part of a new thing, we can lean more on that system model rather than the user's mental model. But when we're moving along to a more consumer-facing audience, we really need to start thinking about how do we help these people understand what they're working with. But I think, this is an adoption curve, so we'll certainly learn things by designing for the innovators and having them as our customers, and we'll learn how to bridge that gap. So I said I'd come back to learning, and just some tips for how might we help people learn what this thing is. So we need to understand where they are right now and what they know. We need to understand where we want them to go. We need to make the steps as small as possible, even if it means a lot more steps. And that's a really good way of kind of helping people take baby steps rather than throwing them in the deep end. We need to help them understand, what from their old world is similar and different to the new world. And we might kind of expose more and hide less than we would in a mature system in order to help them learn those things so that they can start developing the mental models they need. We also might want to provide more feedback and support. Not just you've made an offer on a cool cat thingy, but what does that mean? So I'm seeing this start to be parts of some products. MetaMask, which is the example on the top, has a good video about that recovery phrase in the flow of setting up a wallet. What's the other one? I think that was Soulflare wallet or something, who at least had some screens that you had to go through to explain what was about to happen. So I'm starting to see that support. I had to dig around all my screenshots to find these two examples, though. Not common. Another thing is to be choosing your partners carefully. So if you're going to be, working with, other services, assess the user experience with them and choose partners that work. The long example is an example of a transaction for what's called a shuffle. So when you're you're paying for an NFT, but you don't know which one you're getting. And I know why this happens, but that transaction list is scary. And the little red circle, that's the scroll bar. That's how long that screen is. The bottom example, I bought a piece of art, and I, bought a piece of art. I went to look at it in my wallet, and the one here on the left is MetaMask. I'm like, it's not there. Why is my thing not there? I'm pretty sure I did it right. I'm sure I bought it. Why is it not there? And then it's like, import NFTs. And I went and looked at that article, and I'm like, I don't understand what this means. So I set up a different wallet, and it was just there. So if I was to do this, even though MetaMask is like the primary wallet, I would hope not to use it because it's really confusing. We'll need to be designing onboarding as much as designing the product itself. Like, this is going to take as much effort to design teaching people how to onboard. And the last thing is we need to be thinking about trust. We need to understand what people are worried about, what makes us credible, how are we keeping our users' data safe, how are we managing their data and assets, how are we different from other projects that have been scams. Whoops, thought I had another point there. Let me go backwards, there we go. And we need to be telling people this so that they can understand that we are trustworthy in a world where a lot of the projects aren't. So, quick summary. Web3 isn't one thing. We don't yet have patterns of good practice. We're designing bespoke. The current user experience is terrible, and we need to do better. Understanding users' mental models and designing to bridge them is going to be the interesting and hard thing. It certainly is for me. And we need to design for helping people learn, onboard them well, and have them understand that we're trustworthy. We have a couple of minutes of questions, I think. Otherwise, what I'll do is let me get some lunch. I'll go over to that quiet room that's over there, because I have a hearing impairment and I don't like people. So, in crowds when you're messy. So I'll go over to that little room and we can talk about it a bit more. But I can take some questions now, yeah. I just thought I'd tell you, but let me have some lunch first. Let me get a plate. Awesome. And we'll do some questions now, yeah.
Thanks so much, Donna. Clearly exciting times, but there's still a lot of work for us to do in our industry.
There's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, very good talk, thank you. Again, online, if you have questions, please hit them up in the Q&A tab and send them through. But we'll open up questions to the floor. Anyone with questions for designing for Web3? There must be questions. I'm going to start picking on people.
I was like, somebody's going to say, yeah. Hang on, you're destroying the environment and world. Why are you doing this? Surely that's a question.
That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Obviously, the reputation for Web3 is a little tarnished.
It certainly is.
Is any of the advice you gave specifically for remedying that reputation, or do you have advice for remedying that reputation, or is it just about applying the principles and waiting?
No, it's about applying the principles and delivering really good projects, and then talking about those really good projects and talking about what we did, how we designed well for it, I think is the answer, which is this is a long-term thing that needs to happen. I don't think there's any short-term. Because a lot of the scams, they look trustworthy until they're not.
So when you went through that mental models section and sort of redefining those mental models, how do you sort of see that working from like a design perspective? Because someone comes in with that preconceived idea of how it operates, and you have to sort of guide them through that process of adjusting how they view the system as a whole.
Yeah, like this is literally what I do as a designer in like a lot of cases anyway, is understand where people are right now and what do they know and what do they need to know. And then like the design activity is what elements, what help, what support, what really good screen design, what explanation and tips and help and labelling stuff well and breaking down a process well. Like that's actually designing. That's the cool problem solving part. And it's really individual. And right now it'll be really bespoke. It'll be like literally, okay, exactly who are these users, exactly how do they think, exactly what do they need to do, how many ways can I do that and support them. And then, like, you know, once we've got maybe a product in market for a while and people are getting used to it and getting used to this world, we can reduce that support. Yeah, that's actually kind of just, it's not just, that is what good design is. So yeah, that's the interesting bit.
So you just mentioned how scams look trustworthy until they're not, and building that trust is part of that development of making Web3, you know, become more accessible to everybody. As a designer, how do you do that when you know that you're fighting against a system that is actively trying to deceive their users, when you're, even in the best intentions, you're doing the same thing, but you just know that you're doing it for the best reasons and not for, you know, malicious reasons? So
some of it is unpacking how do people behave when they're behaving badly. So one way that scammy projects behave is they don't actually expose the people who are working on it. They don't actually say, here are the individual humans who work on this project. They don't build genuine community and actually talk to their community and act like genuine humans. So one of our projects, that's exactly what we did. We listed the people, and we all have quite high profiles in industry. We listed the people working on the project so people could actually go, right, these are real humans. We built a Discord, we talk to people like we're real humans, we answer their questions. So if we can unpack, like, what does bad behaviour look like, even when it looks like it's true, we can figure out, and again, this is a kind of design problem as well. Like, then how do we design it so we can help people understand that we're not going to run away with all their money? I just say everything's a design problem. That's the hard bit of figuring it out. But yeah, it's possible, but you have to analyse it. You have to know what it looks like to be bad so that you can figure out what it looks like to be good. But it's a really hard and good question.